Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Well, that feels good, doesn't it? Satisfying. Good day for American justice and accountability and told you so. Anyway, I realized that, and this won't happen much longer since newspapers, the actual physical newspapers go, but I used to hold on to front pages that I knew were historic, were that the news of that day was a historic piece. And I still have, ones and JFK and 9/11. And I thought of hanging on to today's, but I don't know, it just didn't have, nah. And then I thought, for what? For whom? It's one of those things they'll toss out when you're dead and gone. It'll just be another thing to deal with. So I'm not going to. I have to chuckle, though, at the, I think it's the New York Post who has, not the Daily News, excuse me, it wouldn't be the Post. The Daily News has the best one, and it's just flat out, of course, I can't remember it, but it's just an entire big page, nothing but a picture of the defendant and big black letters and huge, typeface and saying something to the effect of, Trump charged with, attempt to overthrow. I don't know. That wouldn't have been it. Sorry. Cullen, if you're going to say something, have the information either in your head or available to you. God, right before we went on air, I happened to see what the Wall Street Journal's front page was. And God, well, for history's purposes, I guess this tells you something about them as well as our history. It is Trump charged with election schemes. Why would you use the word schemes? Why wouldn't you say Trump charged with election crimes or felonies? Or I don't believe at any point in the indictment that the word scheme was employed. Scheme certainly lessens the seeming importance of it. Trump charged with election schemes. Give me a break. Well, what I had to say. Right now, I'm most curious about whether or not, and I haven't been listening to any of the talking heads on this, but whether or not anybody thinks any of these unindicted co-conspirators are going to turn to save their own skins. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about them or, I don't think any of us do. But these are people that are having to make some very personal calculations, and I would argue political calculations as well, because what seems to keep these people in Trump's orbit is not loyalty, fealty, it's fear. Don't you think? I think it's fear. Anyone who would turn on him would be putting a target, a true target on their backs, right? And this is known because, when the thugs that you helped create and empower see you as a turncoat, well, they're coming for you now. So I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about the physical danger that so many people have put themselves in as a result of Donald Trump's existence, actually. I don't know. What he has created, this thug-ocracy, very real, and in a country where there are more guns than humans, and enough nutcases to go do it. I just keep thinking about someone's going to get killed. I mean, people are getting killed all the time in this country, but this would be part of a calculation that anyone would make. And I cannot forget for a moment that somebody like Jack Smith has been willing, where we always say to anybody wearing a uniform, thank you for your service. There is no way to adequately thank Jack Smith for his service, because he has, talk about a target on a back. It's not just him, though, of course. It's his wife. It's his family. And he knows that. And the amount of money now being expended to attempt to secure the people involved in the prosecution of these cases against Trump is extraordinary. So I think one of the most understated parts of the whole thing, underscoring where we are as a country and what's happening now, is fear. Fear. Boy, what a huge role it plays in so many different ways. Fear comes in. It's fear that seems to motivate much of Trump's base. It is fear that the Republican Party has always used to excite its base. It's why they always need a boogeyman. They always need, a reason for their base to show up, because there's something to be afraid of, whether it's gay people or black people or marauding brown people coming across the border, whether it's commies masquerading as Democrats, trying to infect your child's mind in school. Fear in that regard is just such a huge motivator. But fear, understandable fear, for those who are now involved in this, in the attempt to bring these criminals to justice. They are facing potential violence. to themselves and their loved ones. I just think that is understated, and you have to lay that again at Trump's feet, because this is how democracies are destroyed and are replaced by autocracies, through the use of fear. Nothing new going on here. Just we haven't seen it quite so blatantly before. So I don't know. My first question was, will any of these co-conspirators turn? I don't know. That's quite a calculation. I have no sympathy for the corner they painted themselves into, but I don't know. I don't think they'd have the courage to turn. I think they'd rather go to jail. And they will. The other thing I want to point out is that while, these judges get just picked, as we have found out, at random, it's just picking names out of a hat, the worst possible outcome happened in the Mar-a-Lago documents case with the judge that got picked there. Who's, well, I don't have to explain that to you. But the judge that got picked here is, whoa, this woman, and it's interesting, it's women, right? And in the case here, I love that it's a black woman. Got her law degree from Penn Law. And she has tried already a number of cases coming out of January 6th. And she is, the record speaks for itself. She is, without a doubt, the most likely of any judge that has had any of these cases of the people who took part in January 6th. She has given out tougher sentences than any other judge. She has exceeded what even the prosecutors are asking. Prosecutors go for, I guess, let's just, shoot for the moon here. And she's exceeded prosecutors' recommendations 9 times. This is how many cases she's heard of these people. 9 times. And she has accepted their recommendations 14 times. And if you look throughout all of these cases of all of the people that were there on January 6th, the judges have overwhelmingly sentenced these people below what the prosecution was asking. In fact, 80% of the time, the prosecutors went in and said, and we think this person should go to jail for 5 years, and the judges would come down with 2. Not this woman. They'd come in with 5 years, and she'd make it 7. So she has told people that she has sentenced. It has to be made clear that trying to violently overthrow the government, trying to stop the peaceful transition of power, and assaulting law enforcement officers in that effort is going to be met with absolutely certain punishment. And this is the judge who Trump's got. But, as I said, she now joins that group that will be part of history, yes, but whose life has been irretrievably changed by this, by virtue of the fact that she is now a person in grave danger. She and her family. And we know that. The other thing that's been pointed out is that this Smith, he kept it simple. He could have, the 4 counts, he kept it simple, and he didn't venture into sedition. Excuse me. He did not. That indictment does not include charging Trump with sedition or conspiracy to commit sedition, which apparently those in the know say would have been the most difficult one for a jury to go for. And what Smith wants to do is convict. And so the 4 counts he went for are ones in which he feels a great deal of certainty that he has the evidence for a jury to convict. So, I don't know. And I think somebody else pointed, who is this? Peter Baker, I guess, in the New York Times, pointed this out, which is the scariest. Again, another scary part. So here we are. And he says, now the justice system and the electoral system will engage in a 15-month race to see which one will decide Donald Trump's fate first. Not only Donald Trump's fate, but the country's fate. Whether or not a jury and the justice system will be able to make that call before the people of the United States go to vote. I think a lot of people are figuring that this will happen, that the delaying tactics that will be used will probably keep us from seeing the case finished before the election, but you don't know. But who will decide the first, who will issue the first verdict? We, the people, at the polls, or the justice system? And in both cases, that verdict has got to be strong. We know a verdict in the justice system is strong because it has to be unanimous. We ain't going to get unanimity on the electoral front, but we've got to get big, big, big numbers. And then we've got to hope that the system again holds the maligned system, the system that part of the conspiracy to defraud the government and to deprive us of our civil rights, our votes. Part of that was the sowing of doubt about the efficacy of our voting system. And, you can repeat till you're blue in the face that there's so little voter fraud in this country, electoral fraud. It's ridiculous. And yet 30-40% of Republicans, maybe more, think it's endemic. And it's all about keeping them out of office. Another amazing thing is that, let's say, whether or not the jury gets the first word or we, the people, get the first word with the election, there is nothing in the Constitution that says Trump indicted or even Trump convicted. I mean, imagine let's say Smith gets the first shot and the jury comes back and convicts Trump, who is the Republican candidate for president, convicts him. Well, after a conviction, you get sentenced, and she'll send him to jail. Imagine if he's in jail when the election takes place, because there is nothing in the Constitution that says you can't be elected president while you're sitting in jail. There's nothing that says that. Nothing. All of the criteria that the Constitution establishes for being the president of the United States, nowhere does it say you can't be a criminal. Not there. All right, so heading into uncharted waters, and it's good to be reminded of our history in these cases, and why this is so unbelievable. That finally this happened, that finally we came upon someone like Trump who refused to leave power. That has never happened in our country's history, ever. And it was, as I'm sure we all learned in civics class, it was our first president, George Washington, who refused the pleas that he continue to serve as president. No one could imagine another president. There had only been him, and he was good. And he said after 2 terms, no, I'm stepping down. I'm stepping down. And that was a precedent that got set, that stayed precedent, right, until FDR. And then after FDR, through constitutional amendment, 22nd Amendment, it flat out said 2 terms. That's it. So Washington established that. And then John Adams, who came after him, established the precedent of peacefully surrendering power after losing the election. And every president in office since the beginning of this country, if they lost the election, they left. And they left peacefully. Ronald Reagan is quoted as saying that while we accept this as normal, because it's ever been thus, Americans just always make that assumption, right? We always did. You lose, you leave. Reagan said, we think it's normal, but it's nothing less than a miracle. Well, so it's a miracle until Donald Trump comes. So it's also been pointed out that, like when you think of like frauds, because fraud is what this, he's a fraud. The indictment talks about fraud. And when we think of historic cases of fraud in the United States, what do you think of? I think of Ponzi. I mean, to the point where, Ponzi scheme. That guy had a whole crime, named after him. Bernie Madoff, fraud. I mean, lots of fraudsters, obviously, in our history. But Donald Trump, no one will ever, God, I hope, come close. Some of the stuff I was reading today, somebody said that this amounts to, without a doubt, one of the most sensational frauds, if not the most, I don't know, one of the most, the most sensational fraud in the history of the United States. And this funny thing did you read the indictment? Fascinating. One of the things that is leveled at, while he's trying to berate Pence into doing the deed, we know he called him, he was swearing at him and everything, but Smith puts in the indictment the quote from that had to have come from Pence. Pence must have told Smith this. And Pence must have said, he said to me when I refused, he said, "You're too honest." Only Donald Trump would think that was an indictment of someone. You're too honest. For him, that's a deal breaker. Are you kidding me? You want me to be honest? Incredible. All righty. We got a caller. Hello.
Hi, Lynn. It's Beth calling. I was starting to email you about all the Trump indictments, but then I realized I was writing a small Russian novel and thought I would just call you.
Good idea.
I have to say, when I hear of all the various indictments of all kinds, from the papers to the taxes to the voting to the this to that, I just get more and more upset with every single Republican senator that did not vote to impeach after January 6th. And they kept, because of the laissez-faire attitude of it doesn't matter, he's out of office. No, you know what, assholes, it did matter, because it would have kept him from running again. And you couldn't be sending this country into possibly another constitutional crisis. And that's where I just get
there's so many places where you can. I mean, the Republicans, when did they ever? I mean, you had McConnell in that period, essentially making the case that he should be impeached and then voting against it.
I know it. And again, it was only those senators that weren't up, that were leaving office that voted, had the quote unquote courage to vote yes. And again, I don't see this going anywhere in a good place. First of all, we know justice may be swift, but it's incredibly slow. And I mean, again, we have nothing in the Constitution to say what happens if he's still under trial as he, goes forward. If he wins the presidency, then we have the thing of, well, can he pardon himself at the moment he takes office?
Listen, if he wins the presidency, game over.
Yes, the only place.
Yeah, he wins, it's over. We're done.
And then if he's convicted in New York, if charges are forthcoming, as we presume in Georgia,
those are state courts, right?
Then now we're going to have the issue of states' rights versus the federal government, in the sense of the states are saying this person's guilty of a crime. What will they do? Suspend the sentence till he's out of office? Well, he ain't leaving office ever.
Well, that's right. So that's why as I said, if he wins, it's over, because he will immediately do what autocrats do. He'll destroy whatever's left of the Department of Justice. He will destroy the government.
Absolutely.
Well,
as we saw. And the sad part is now with these years and, what he's done, the people, whoever is pushing him, are now smarter, brighter, of not the mistakes not to make again. And that's even the scarier part of it. So again, McConnell, Capito, Cruz, Rubio, all of you, shame and a pox on your houses if this democracy fails.
Yeah, they all, and I'll go back to what I was saying about fear, Beth. I think they're cowards. I think they're fearful. I think they're scared. They've unleashed the mob, and they know if they were to stand up to the mob's god, the mob would turn on them.
Yeah, they don't want to fall in the Kinzinger. They don't want to fall in the same path of Kinzinger and Cheney. And you know what?
Who are living under constant threat. You think she's got free range in her life or her family? I mean, no.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, that was the thing too. She wasn't even able to campaign because her security detail said, we're afraid that something will happen. So if there's someone who has a bigger set than all of them, and I disagree with her politics completely, but I have to say this, that Cheney Jean, she had a big set of cojones. Yeah.
She's a strong, tough, fearless woman with the wrong politics.
And for her to tell off Jim Jordan as the crowd is like, pushing through on January 6th, telling him he's a fucking asshole. You unleashed this.
Yes.
I thought, whew, okay. All right.
Yeah, you gotta love her. You gotta love her.
In that instance, yes. And only that.
In that instance, yes. But I mean, wow, what she showed, more bravery and commitment to the rule of law than any other, anybody else, that these elected officials, these Republicans. I can't believe when people continue to talk about the Republican Party as if it is a viable Democratic party. And I mean that in a party in a democracy. They are not.
Oh, and if you see especially what the RNC outlaid for the September debate thing, the new criteria, I mean, they're pretty much trying to wedge Chris Christie out of it, who we know is only in it just to be Trump's thorn in the side. During the debates. But the criteria they're putting out there too, just so you only have him and you'll have idiot DeSantis maybe. And then you have all the other ones that just bow down to his feet and say this is a crime against the judicial thing, when the only two really saying that this is unconstitutional and this person's vile is really Christie and Asa Hutchinson. They're the only two that are saying these are legitimate charges. And no one will ever hear them the way the RNC is doing what they're doing for the debates.
Ridiculous. None of it matters. None of all that, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all assuming, right, that Trump gets the nomination. Is there any possible scenario that you can conjure where he doesn't? Because it would require, again, Republicans to be
initially. I thought that the money within the party was going to dictate who was going to try to be the next heir apparent and just kind of silence him and put him down. I think the big money realizes we can't do that. It's just not going to happen. And I think they had a lot of hope in DeSantis and realized how awful of a candidate he is. So now what do they do?
Well, I have to tell you, though, we should all remember that DeSantis, we all thought for sure, right, that he was an inevitability. He was going to be able to take Trump on because Fox News was behind him, and it was clear he was going to, this is the way they were going to get rid of Trump, is get behind DeSantis. And remember that was just a given. And it didn't happen.
No,
it didn't happen.
I was right there because I
thought never underestimate Trump. Ever.
Yeah, because the base that they used to fall to, the evangelical, all the, I'm going to be mean here and say the wackadoos of the party, they're not fledgling, and there's nothing they can do. Their money won't do anything. They're at a real impasse. And the question is, do they say, hey, we fall on the sword here, let Biden or whoever the Democrat is have another one? My fear is they're then going to propagate whatever independent candidate happens to come up.
Well, listen, there will be, between Robert Kennedy Jr. and these no labels jerks and others attempting to do this, spoiler thing, this is really, really concerning. Again, if you don't know your history, the year was 2000, and it was Ralph Nader who helped elect, by his absurd candidacy. He didn't have a shot. He helped, without a doubt, he elected George W. Bush, the president, which is then we got into Iraq, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that happened, that was Nader's doing, and all the people who voted for him. And people have to understand, the people who refused to vote for Hillary, a lot of them for the same reason, helped clear the way for Donald Trump.
Right. The Dems have only benefited really once from an independent running, and that was Ross Perot that helped Bill Clinton get in. But most of the time, yes, it hurts the Democrat and favors the Republican.
Which it would definitely do this time around. So, Oh dear. Well, hey, Beth,
thank you for the call. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Hey, in the indictment, just for those of you who haven't bothered to read it, Pennsylvania gets a whole little section because it is one of the states where the Republicans, where Trump and his cohort tried to, deprive us of our votes, of our civil rights. So this makes it into the indictment, our votes. It says on November 11, 2020, defendant publicly maligned a Philadelphia city commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. As a result, that Philadelphia city commissioner and his family received death threats. On November 25th, the day after Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of certification to the federal government that Biden's electors were the legitimate electors for the state, co-conspirator one, that's Rudy Giuliani, orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg attended by state legislators. let me tell you who presided at that. A state legislator who you might remember. His name was Mastriano, and he ran for governor against Josh Shapiro. Co-conspirator one, Giuliani, falsely claimed that at this meeting that Pennsylvania had issued 1.8 million absentee ballots and received 2.5 million in return. That's what Giuliani told them at the meeting in Gettysburg. And in the days thereafter, a campaign staffer wrote internally that Giuliani's allegation was just wrong and there's no way we can defend it. The deputy campaign manager responded, "We've been saying this for a while. It's very frustrating." So this is him showing how Giuliani and Trump are peddling crap that they know that those around them are telling them is crap. Then it says on December 4, after 4 Republican leaders of the Pennsylvania legislature issued a public statement that the General Assembly lacked the authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own slate of electors, and that doing so would violate the state election code and Constitution, Trump retweeted a post labeling these legislators cowards. Now, here again, as everything we say with Trump, it's always the opposite of what he's saying. Those 4 Republican leaders were not being cowards. If Trump's calling you a coward, that is a badge of courage. On December 31st and January 3rd, Trump repeatedly raised with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general the allegation that in Pennsylvania, there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. And each time the Justice Department officials informed Trump that his claim was false. Anyway, so that's in there about Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, this is from today's paper, and this is just going to keep snowballing. In Michigan, one of the people who was involved in the effort to deprive Michigan voters of their votes, and then who later ran to be the attorney general and was defeated, sort of like Mastriano. A lot of these conspirators then tried to get into offices where they could make sure that in 2024, there wouldn't be any of this trouble in fixing the vote. That's why Mastriano went after the governorship. And remember, he flat out said he'd be able to decide the election. The guy in Michigan, a guy named Matthew DePerno, he has now been charged with 4 felonies in Michigan. And some other state representative in Michigan was also charged. And so you will see in these states where the Republican legislators who attempted to help this conspiracy are going to face justice, even if they're not facing it from Jack Smith. The states themselves are going after these people. So, I don't know. I don't know, guys. My God. Hey, speaking of the law, I was walking my dog and I came upon a sign, which I've seen many times before, but I read it. I just read the whole thing. And it said, "No dogs." I mean, big red letter. This is an official sign. And I pointed out to my dog, look at this. It's just flat out discrimination. Is it? Look at this. "No dogs" in big red letters. And then it says in slightly less intimidating letters, "Permitted on school property." And this was posted at a Pittsburgh public school. "No dogs permitted on school property." I did once, to come to think of it, take a picture of my dog peeing on this sign. But you know. But here's the part I hadn't ever read, because there's like small print on this thing. It says Pittsburgh Code 633.09. And then it says enforced. And I guess the thing that got me last night is I'm thinking, why would they put enforced, saying that this is a crime? No dogs permitted. Here is the site of the Pittsburgh Code, and we're enforcing this. If it's a law, I mean, would they ever put that out and say not enforced? I mean, and we know that this is true. There are laws that are simply not enforced. But I find it odd that they would make a point of saying that this one is enforced. Isn't that I mean, that's the given, I would think. God. Okay. Oh, I just wanted to share a little bit of Tom Nichols in The Atlantic and what he said. He was so happy. Trump is accused of multiple conspiracies against the United States, all designed to keep him in power against the will of the voters and in violation of the Constitution. The former president is accused of knowing that he lost a free and fair election, and rather than transferring power to a duly elected successor, engaged in criminal plots against our democracy, all while firing up a mob that would later storm the Capitol. And then he goes on to say, Trump's record of lawlessness means nothing to Republicans. Nothing. That's something that we're having, I know a lot of us individually and collectively, trouble dealing with. But Tom Nichols goes on to say, but Republicans now more than ever face a moment of truth. They must decide if they are partisans or patriots. They can no longer claim to be both. The rest of us, as a nation, but also as individuals, can no longer indulge the pretense that Trump is just another Republican candidate, that supporting Donald Trump is just another political choice, and that agreeing with Trump's attacks on our democracy is just a difference of opinion. I, Tom Nichols says, have long described Trump's candidacies as moral choices and tests of civic character. But I've also cautioned that Americans, for the sake of social comity, not comedy, comity, should resist too many arguments about politics among ourselves. But I can no longer defend that. The indictment handed down yesterday challenges every American to put a shoulder to the wheel and defend our republic in every peaceful, legal, and civilized way they can. According to the charges, not only did Trump try to overturn the election, he presided over a clutch of co-conspirators who intended to put down any further challenges to Trump's continued rule by force. According to the indictment, and this is another part of the indictment that is really rather breathtaking from the indictment. The deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4, now I'm not sure who 4 is. Is that Sidney Powell? Anyway, the deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been fraud in the election, and that if Trump remained in office nonetheless, there would be, quote, riots in every major city in the United States. Co-conspirator 4 responded, well, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. Now, for those of you who don't understand what that co-conspirator is saying, the Insurrection Act allows the President of the United States to deploy American armed forces against American citizens. That was said in the White House. That's why there's an Insurrection Act. If we would have taken to the streets, they were willing to deploy the military against Americans. The alleged plot, back to Nichols, inside the White House was not merely to invalidate an election. It included the possibility of unleashing our military against us. This is why we can no longer merely roll our eyes when an annoying uncle rhapsodizes about stolen elections. We should not gently ask our parents if perhaps we might change the channel from Fox. We are not obligated to gingerly change the subject when an old friend goes on about demon rats or the dire national security implication of Hunter Biden's genitalia. Enough of all of this. We can love our friends and our family and our neighbors without accepting their terms of debate. To support Trump is to support sedition and violence. And we must be willing to speak the truth, not only to power, but to our fellow citizens. The brutish bullying by Trump and his kind is aimed at stopping the rest of us from speaking out. But after yesterday, every American citizen who cares about the Constitution should affirm without hesitation that any form of association with Trump is reprehensible. That each of us will draw moral conclusions about anyone who continues. And that these conclusions will guide both our political and our personal choices. This is painful advice to give and to follow. No one, including me, wants to lose friends or chill valued relationships over so small a man as Trump. But our democracy is about to go into legal and electoral battle for its very survival. If we don't speak up to one another, as well as to the media and to our elected officials, and Trump defeats us all by regaining power and making a mockery of American democracy, then we have all lost a lot more than a few friendships. We face in Trump a dedicated enemy to our Constitution. And if he returns to office, his next administration will be a gang of felons, goons, and resentful mediocrities, all of whom will gladly serve Trump's sociopathic needs while greedily dividing the spoils of power. I'll finish it up. In the 1982 film The Verdict, Paul Newman plays Frank Galvin, an ambulance-chasing attorney with an alcohol addiction, who takes on what he thinks will be a routine malpractice suit and soon finds himself fighting for justice against powerful institutions determined to stop him. On the eve of the trial, all seems lost. His mentor and former partner tries to comfort him. There'll be other cases, his friend says. Galvin knows better. There are no other cases, he says quietly, eyes closed. This is the case. He repeats this, whispering to himself over and over. There are no other cases. This is the case. Jack Smith has indicted Donald Trump for trying to overthrow our system of government. There are no other cases. This is the case. Yeah. Well, so the other night, I'm off this now. I've got what? We got 5 minutes left in the show. Can I? Okay, I'm done. So tomorrow, I don't know what time. Trump's going back to court. Trump's got to show up to be formally charged. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So the other night was garbage night in my neighborhood, and when I walk the dog on garbage night, I have to be particularly, aware. Because, I mean, dogs, they follow their noses, and man, on garbage night, it's, whoa! If you're a dog walker, garbage night is also a night to actually see your neighbors. And you're seeing your neighbors all doing something they don't want to do. Dragging heavy bins of garbage down their driveways or out onto the street. And as I walk and observe the garbage, I have many thoughts. First of all, it's just unbelievable how much we throw away, how much garbage we create. I mean, and and you see that there are some houses that are, more so than others. But wow, this is what fuels the economy. This is our consumer economy at work. We get stuff, we use it, we toss it. But I have to tell you, I think the way people put out their garbage tells you something about them. I think you can make certain assumptions or judgments about a person who puts out their garbage and clearly is thinking about the next person who will deal with that garbage. The person who really's got the job. And if you care about that next person in the chain that will dispose of your garbage, well, you make sure, first of all, that it's not too heavy, that it's secure, that it's safe, that on days when it's both recycling and, the regular garbage, that you might separate those two because those are two separate groups of people that are going to come. And when I see people who clearly are thinking of the next people, the working stiffs who have a very hard and dangerous job, it makes me feel good about them. That's a good person that put that garbage out. And then I look at somebody else, I'll think, that's not a very good person. That is somebody who's not thinking about anybody but themselves. And then there are people, and what I've said this before, but I'll never get over it. People who think taking out the garbage means pulling it out to the sidewalk in front of their houses and putting it on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk I'm walking on, forcing me into sometimes mud, wet, or street. What are they thinking? And then I think about them. These are people who never walk. I bet these are people who drive to a gym and run on a treadmill or something. But these are people who don't walk in the neighborhood. So they don't see the sidewalk as what it is, what it's for. The same people who park on the sidewalk. But I just want to say, be mindful when putting out your garbage. Be mindful. Be considerate. And try to make less of it. All I'm saying. And aren't you glad you don't live in my neighborhood where I'm walking by your house and making harsh judgments about your character based on how your garbage looks? You know? I'm not the only one who does it. All righty, that's it for me, guys. I'll talk at you tomorrow, okay?
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.